G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags. And yes, as you can see, the boat's beta has rolled out. Well, that's not entirely true. What you see here is the boat's pre-beta test, which seems to be a really short way of saying Final Alpha Limited Access Control Physics and Server Stability Test. Anyways, more on that in a moment. Today we are setting out in the John F. Kennedy PT-109, which is in fact an Elco PT-314. So let's run over the boat stats before we get into the gameplay. This US PT boat is currently rank 3 battle rating 4.3. This is of course subject to change this early in development of this particular game mode. It's armed with a 40mm Bofors L60 cannon with 1000 shells, a 37mm AN M4 cannon with 420 shells, a 20mm Orlikon Mark II cannon with 420 shells, and two dual 12.7mm AN M2 heavy machine guns with 4,000 rounds of ammunition in total. And of course all the ballistic weapons are on turret mounts. And of course it wouldn't be a PT boat without torpedoes. The 314 carries four 571mm Mark 13 torpedoes, two on the left, two on the right, and standard releases the torpedoes in groups of two. The Citadel armour is 7mm with a maximum speed of 77 km per hour and a 51-ton displacement. So, as you can see, the first boats in War Thunder are not reserves or rank 1 vehicles. These should be around halfway up the tree. However, while this is an interesting place to start, we should probably take into account what this pre-beta has, or more to the point what it doesn't have. At this point, the physics on the boats are not fully implemented, controls and systems are not finalised, and the damage models are still in development. There is no research tree, no modules or no customisable systems, even ammunition selection is limited. Even the game mode itself is not standard. The game mode is set to realistic here, however there are many arcade systems added for this test, such as reloads in battle that are working in the background. This pre-beta is quite literally a mass server test. Part of it will be to test for server stability and whether or not it can handle all the boats at once. One will be to take everything that they've currently done in developing these boats and put it to one mass test, so players can actually poke the ships, see exactly what they're capable of, see what's broken, what's not, what needs to be adjusted. And last of all, we'll be having a close look at how the boats interact with the maps themselves. This style of combat map design is going to be incredibly important, possibly more important than any of the other game modes, and Gaijin will need to see exactly how players utilise the map and what they can do to improve the map design. But anyways, as you can see on screen at the moment, I'm basically getting my ass handed to me here. I've gotten myself pinned between two ships, and they are capable of breaking the rudder controls over and over and over again and breaking the engine, shutting down my ability to move. My engine's destroyed, I'm on fire, I'm burning inside. I don't have any way of putting the fire out, and there we go, we've been taken out. This was actually one of the first things I noticed that probably will need to be adjusted in a fairly reasonable hurry. The damage models are still in development, which is sort of understandable. They've got to tinker around with those, and they need people to shoot up a few boats so they can see what they need to adjust in order to make it work. The problem is at the moment they don't actually have repair timers, because they need a few boats shot up in order to work out exactly what times they need to repair individual modules. So it looks like for the first part of this test, they've taken the modules, or the repair timers for the modules. Ooh, missed the torpedo drop. Anyways, because they don't have repair timers for the modules, it looks like they've taken the repair timers straight out of tanks. So at the moment, you can damage a engine in a single burst, because most of these PT boats are made of wood. They're really easy to penetrate, especially with the higher caliber guns. You can destroy an entire PT boat in under 30 seconds, quite easily. But the standard repair timer for fixing an engine is about 30 seconds, so if you take a crippling engine hit, you are probably going to die, unless something happens to draw the enemy team away from you, or distract them from continuing to shoot you. You will be dead before you can fix that engine, so any critical damage is almost a guaranteed shutdown. But once again, as I said before, this section is all in development, so I imagine those repair timers are also being watched fairly closely at the moment. I would think that they will be significantly reduced. So, making my way into the B cap, we're going to quickly cap this section out. This holds both caps for our team, forcing the enemy in to try and force on one of the points. And it looks like we have a target back to the right. I'm just checking for my rear. I want to make sure nothing's coming up behind me. We've got two aircraft in the background. Incidentally, if you haven't got one of these packs, the way it works is this is ran as an event. It's only available for those who have pre-purchased one of the ship packs. When you go in, all you do is select the nation of which you purchase the boat, and you will automatically receive the boat when you go into battle, plus an SBD dive bomber with a bomb load on board as your aircraft. And looks like right torpedo, looks good, takes it, and I love that. And destroyed. Honestly, that probably shouldn't have taken 2 torpedoes. The 571mm torpedo, that boat should have been reduced to splinters on the first impact. The second torpedo shouldn't have even had debris to hit on its way through, but it did look good. I will say, once again, Gaijin's art department and their animation department has completely outdone themselves. The effects are absolutely beautiful. The maps are really nice to look at, the textures are nice, the water is convincing. The little details are all there. It's like, for example, when you take a massive engine hit, you'll notice if you look at your wake, you actually start leaving a stream of oil behind you that discolors the water. If you take a massive hit and are burning lots of damage and you park stationary, the water around your boat will slowly fill with an inky black oil that has all the rainbow coloration effects that you get when oil is on water. It looks really nice. The details here are spot on. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm not talking too much about the gameplay at this point, and that's because, well, there's really not much we can really assess in this particular area at this time. The games themselves, it's interesting to have a look at the boats and see exactly how they're going to work, but with the damage models not in place, the control methods for the weapons still not finalised, and most importantly, even the repair timers being out of sync, the gameplay we see now, which is, I've heard it described as playing a tanks match with nothing but whirlwinds, which, at least to some extent, is actually not an unfair assessment. There is a little bit more to it than that, but I wouldn't argue and say anybody who used that description was wrong. And yes, I'm an absolutely horrible shot with these AAA guns, but to be fair, he is a ways out. I am trying to hit a target at long range. And this would have been beautiful, except for the match ending. 2 torpedoes straight into its nose and then ram it sideways, but it didn't count. So anyways, the current gameplay is very point and click. It does seem to be the case that this is a direct result of the fact that the damage models and the damage timers are not quite finished yet at this point. Once you've sort of got your guns on somebody and you're doing critical damage to their internals, it actually makes very little sense to back off at any time with the current damage modeling, and this is because at the moment the timers to repair items on your ship or your boat are rather long. Once you've actually got critical hits in, you can effectively shut down an enemy ship and then keep pounding them, and there is nothing that they can do to free themselves at this point. There is no magic repair kit, there is no fire extinguisher for them to activate. They are reliant on those repair timers, which are exceedingly long at this point, in many cases longer than the actual time to kill for the boats themselves. And this compounds itself, because the ships themselves have a larger number of internal modules than a tank does, and the way the damage timer calculates how long you need to repair is based on the number of damaged systems that need to be repaired in what order they needed to be repaired in. And that causes another problem, because I have had, as a result of this, both received and managed to inflict, by careful aiming, repair timers at over 1,600 seconds. So, for the moment, in all honesty, we can't really sit here and judge the gameplay in its current state. We can have a look at the maps themselves though, and this is going to be very important. I mentioned this a little bit earlier on. At the moment there are 3 maps in the game. They seem to be reasonably well designed, reasonable size about them. There's enough room to maneuver and some interesting islands and terrain features to maneuver around. But map design in this is going to be possibly the most important thing to this entire game mode and making it work. In War Thunder Ground Forces, tanks you can hold down in valleys and depressions in the map. You can look for higher terrain to get into good sniper positions on your enemy by climbing the side of a hill. You can use the terrain to your advantage. In boats, sea level is constant, or relatively constant. Even in the wildest of storms or the changing of tides, it doesn't vary by a huge amount, definitely less than the terrain variation on land. And it's not stable. You can't hull down a boat. You can't climb a wave to find a way of shooting down. You're fighting on a 2D flat plane with very little change in elevation or depression. And this makes the layout of the map doubly important, because the positioning of those islands, the size of your waterways, how much room there is to maneuver in each section of the map, This is now the most important thing to building tactics within the game. The map design in War Thunder boats is going to have to be razor sharp. Any poorly designed maps are going to have a very seriously detrimental effect to gameplay itself. That being said, what I've seen here so far, just playing around for the day, and this is my first impressions after one day, probably 30 or 40 matches in the game mode so far, over a couple of different ships, I can see potential here, but it's going to have to be very carefully managed in order to make this work properly. It's not the War Thunder ships that we were all hoping for at one point, but War Thunder boats might be enjoyable, but it will come down to how well the changes from this point on go in, how well the damage modelling is done, how well the repair timers are balanced, and how well the maps are designed. Anyways, ladies and gents, I'm going to do a little bit more on ships over the next coming days. I've got a couple of different ships to look at. This is just the first impressions video. Future videos I will be more talkative about what's going on in the game, less about my overall feelings on what I've seen, and I hope you'll hang around and check them out with me. Anyways, ladies and gents, click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more, don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Drive smart, drive safe, I'll catch you on the waves.